Minister, thanks for your time this morning, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, I've just got to get your reaction to that long night on religious discrimination. 5 moderates crossing the floor, handing Labor that big win. Your thoughts on that and the 5 who voted against their own side?
Well, good morning. It was certainly a big night, and I think really proceedings in the House finished just after 5 a.m. this morning. But it was a night of a lot of emotion, a lot of passion from members debating what was really very important legislation. It was legislation that we said at the last election that we would actually take through Parliament, so that process has well and truly started. And it's important to note that it was the Religious Discrimination Act that was passed through the House. It will now go through and be debated in the Senate today, I believe. So more will come out of that during the course of the day. Look, yes, there were 5 members of the Liberal Party who chose to cross the floor. We're well and truly on the record as saying that the Liberal Party does allow people to vote in accordance with their views. The views that they expressed actually weren't the views of the government, but they were still at liberty to put their views and to vote accordingly.
Can you live with the changes to extend more protections?
I want to make sure that people's freedoms are respected and that people have the opportunity to choose to worship or not to worship if that's what they choose, and no one should be discriminated for the beliefs or the thoughts that they have in relation to religious matters or other matters. So I'm very comfortable with the government's position, what we took into Parliament last night, what we passed with the religious discrimination bill. I think that's very important. No one wants to see anyone discriminated against, particularly for those matters. There are a number of quite significant reforms, and I'm very comfortable with the passing of the Religious Discrimination Act.
Yeah, but I mean, does this prove that extensions to include trans kids should have been included in the first place?
Look, I think there's going to be continuing debate about that when it goes to the Senate, and I think there are some real issues that need to be discussed because there are always some unintended consequences that need to be fully examined. Now, I am very concerned about impacts on single-sex schools, so what's going to happen at all boys or all girls schools, how that's going to be managed. But having said that, I also have a lot of confidence in our schools to be able to manage situations in the best interests of the children who attend there. OK,
Minister, onto these claims, quite startling actually, from Mike Burgess overnight. He is claiming Aspiring has tried to infiltrate the upcoming election. How was it caught out? And it's a nice approval here for you that the system's working.
Look, it absolutely is. And of course, last night, the Director General of Security, Mike Burgess, gave his annual threat assessment, and he announced that after full assessment, the terrorism threat in Australia remains at probable. It's been there since 2014. So that means that there are people out there with the capability and the intent to do us harm. So our terrorist threat level remains at probable. But he also touched on some other matters that I think are very important to us. One was the increasing risks to us from foreign interference and espionage. He also spoke about terrorism and the fact that lone actors were going to continue to be an issue to us, and he talked about ideologically motivated violent extremism and really made the point that it's not as simple as right or left wing. It's actually violent extremism that's ideologically motivated. Now, to go to the point about political interference, Mike did use as an example a particularly concerning circumstances where, thanks to the good work of ASIO, the foreign interference was disrupted.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, particularly as we go to election this year. But I think it's also important to note the foreign interference occurs at all levels of government, local, state and federal, and that's what we have to make sure we're countering.
Yeah, and he referred to a puppeteer, but who is the puppet master here, Minister? Is it Russia or is it China?
Well, as you would be aware, Mike Burgess didn't disclose that last night, and I think that the point that we have to take away from that is that there is at least one nation that has been involved. That's certainly a concern for us, but there are potentially others. So ASIO doesn't just concentrate on one or two nations; it has a very wide reach. And it would be wrong of us to just focus on one or two nations when we know that it's in the interests of some other countries to interfere in our political system.
Okay, just a final one here, Minister, on this push to mandate a third jab. How disruptive do you think that's going to be for international travel if people are going to need 3 shots?
Well, I'm delighted that our borders are going to fully reopen to fully vaccinated travellers on the 21st of February, and that's less than 2 weeks ago. That's going to be an enormous boost to our tourism providers and to our economy here. Now, we've been very careful to make sure that we have always spoken about fully vaccinated because we know that there have been changes from time to time. Now, we took advice from our Chief Medical Officer, Professor Paul Kelly, before we made the announcement earlier this week. And the advice that we received from Professor Kelly was that it was effectively a double dose of the likes of AstraZeneca, Pfizer, etc. But when you look at fully vaccinated, you have to look at those vaccines that have just a single dose to be fully vaccinated. We will always take the advice that is provided to us by the Chief Medical Officer, and he sources his information from a wide range of sources. So I'm very confident that we'll continue to follow his advice and he will be giving us good and strong advice.